If you remember, as we mentioned in our video last night, the Israeli army completely surrounded the Gaza city center and launched a major operation against Hamas tunnel networks. These operations have been going on since the night. In the official statement of the Israeli Defense Forces, he shared that Hamas destroyed very important weapons depots and destroyed the person responsible for the supply of weapons. Gaza City, the main stronghold of the Hamas militant group in the region, was surrounded by Israeli forces. The army said troops were advancing towards the heart of the densely populated city, while Hamas fighters suffered heavy casualties. The Israeli military statement said 2 separate strikes eliminated Mahsein Abu Zina, a leading Hamas armored vehicle, and fighters firing anti-tank or surface-to-surface rockets. Today, the Israeli army began a huge assault on Gaza once more, fully equipped. The strikes today have been extremely strategic and powerful. Israel shelled Beit Hanun early in the morning using howitzers from Sderot town. Israel then went for Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of the Hamas house. Ismail Haniyeh's Gaza home was hit by a missile fired by an Israeli unmanned aerial vehicle. The Gazan people are going through a terrible time as a result of these heavy Israeli attacks. Israel accomplished another significant development today. The Gavati Brigade of the Israel Defense Forces captured a Hamas stronghold in the northern Gaza Strip. With this win, the Israel Defense Forces discovered records that were essential to their advancement in the conflict. The building was purportedly home to Hamas intelligence headquarters located in Jabalia, as well as terrorists led by Najiba. Nevertheless, there is currently insufficient information available to corroborate this assertion. Soldiers found the Hamas intelligence headquarters and related materials inside the castle, including intricate maps, charts, communications equipment, and personal information on Hamas terrorists and commanders. Similar items were discovered on the corpses of terrorists who had been caught and slain following the October 7 attacks. The documents contained the militant group's operating orders as well as command and control charts. Concurrently, the Israel Defense Forces declared that the Combat Engineering Corps is operating in the Gaza Strip to build access roads, remove explosives from the region, and destroy Hamas's terrorist cells and infrastructure. Israeli military engineers and infantrymen also located and destroyed militant locations that were used to organize and carry out terrorist attacks. Documents pertaining to the Combat Engineering Corps' operations were also shared by the Israel Defense Forces. The commander of the 603rd Battalion released a statement. Terrorists who used civilian roadways to harm us were encountered while we were performing our duties. Naturally, we attacked and eliminated them. To win, my squad will stop at nothing. In the 7 days since Hamas assaulted Israel on October 7, more than 330 troops have lost their lives. Troops from the intelligence and armored corps have attempted several attacks against Hamas fighters and tunnel systems in the Gaza Strip earlier in the day. After that, the troops killed a large number of the 15 militants that the armored corps was battling at the same time, and 3 Hamas observation points were demolished by targeting tanks. Last night, an operation against Hamas militants in the West Bank was carried out by the Israel Defense Forces in Shin Bet. Israeli security forces apprehended dozens of suspects during the operation, which saw the Israel Defense Forces and the Shin Bet arrest several individuals suspected of being involved in terrorist activities in the Gush Etzion area, near the Palestinian settlement of Beit Umar and connected to Hamas. In the meantime, during searches, Israeli soldiers discovered military hardware. All day there were heavy confrontations. Israeli forces had to deal with stone throwers and barriers during the operation. The Israeli forces opened fire in response to the individuals hurling stones. The stone throwers reportedly suffered numerous. Terrorists hurled bombs at Shin Bet agents and Israel Defense Forces in the Palestinian hamlet of Jabba. In Al-Fawar in Bethlehem, weapons including rockets and ammo were seized. Israeli fighters also seized a stolen motorcycle, a makeshift submachine gun, and ammunition, in addition to a rifle. Since the beginning of the current conflict, over 1,300 people have been arrested in the West Bank, 800 of whom had ties to Hamas, according to the Israel Defense Forces Shin Bet. The Israeli Prime Minister declared that the release of Israeli hostages would be a prerequisite for the ceasefire. This occurs not long after a Secretary of State, David Ross, urged Israel to end the conflict while on a visit there to give Gaza assistance. Premier Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel had a meeting with Secretary of State Anthony J. Blinken yesterday in order to allow and simultaneously facilitate greater deliveries of desperately needed food, water, medication, and other supplies to Gaza. Blinken advocated for a series of humanitarian pauses. Netanyahu stated during the call that he had made it clear that Israel rejects any interim truce that does not involve the release of our detainees and that we will continue to employ force. Mr. Netanyahu also took issue with Israel's denial of fuel entry into Gaza, citing the need for fuel to run hospitals and desalination units that supply drinking water, while permitting the restricted supply of other essential goods. Reporters in Tel Aviv were informed by Mr. Blinken that the U.S. supports Israel. Mr. Blinken continued his statement, "We have provided Israel with guidance on how to minimize civilian losses while locating and eliminating Hamas terrorists, advice that only the closest of allies can provide. We are debating specific measures to permit increased humanitarian entry into Gaza." In the wake of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah's address yesterday, the Israeli army was placed on high alert in case Hezbollah launched an attack in Lebanon. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, stated in his speech that the attacks on Israel by Hamas on October 7th have now expanded to other fronts. Hezbollah has been launching cross-border missile and rocket attacks in the months following the start of the most recent conflict. The militants who support Iran admitted that men had been lost in the most recent fighting, to which Israel retaliated with aircraft and artillery. A little while later, Syria released a statement as well. In overnight fighting with ISIS in the northern province of Raqqa, at least 10 Syrian soldiers were slain and more were injured, according to a Syrian war monitor. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the conflict between Israel and Hamas has caused instability in the Middle East. After briefly seizing control of several Syrian army posts near the village of Madaan, ISIL terrorists fled as daylight approached. 6 fighters associated with the Syrian government were injured at least. ISIS did not take credit for the fighting on its propaganda outlets, and neither did the Syrian official media report on the fighting. The U.S. is still steadfastly supporting Israel in the face of all of this violence. A Republican plan to give Israel $14.05 billion in military funding was approved by the U.S. House of Representatives, sparking partisan disagreement over the generally divided subject of backing the U.S. steadfast ally. The plan was financed by reductions to the Internal Revenue Service and was adopted by a vote of 196 to 226, primarily along party lines. Since the far-right faction of his party forced Kevin McCarthy out of his position as Speaker of the House a week ago, he has been absent. The move is the new Republican Speaker's first significant legislative action since taking office. A total of $4 billion of the package is earmarked for the purpose of replacing stockpiled military hardware, such as missile defense systems like David's Sling and Iron Dome, with systems deployed in Israel. This goal will be accomplished with the assistance of the package. Yesterday, Johnson made a statement on his social networking site in which he pleaded with both the Senate and the White House to adopt the measure as quickly as possible, because they cannot afford to miss out on this golden opportunity. I am pleading with both the Senate and the White House to move quickly in order to pass this bill into law, just as the House of Representatives did earlier today. The Democrats have made it clear that they are opposed to the plan due to the fact that it does not include any assistance for Ukraine and that it reduces spending. As a result, it is highly doubtful that it would become law. According to the White House, the plan must first receive approval from the Senate, where the Democrats hold a majority, before it can be put to a vote or signed by President Biden. The law would have devastating repercussions for our national security and our partnerships for many years to come. Instead, Biden asked Congress to authorize an emergency budget of $106 billion so that aid could be sent to Israel, Taiwan, and the Ukraine. We are grateful that you have decided to follow us.